She just got served divorce papers, but he's the one who faked losing his job to set her up. He's calm. She's furious. What did this woman do to make him choose revenge over reconciliation?
Let me tell you about the moment Marcus Bennett's marriage died. It wasn't when he caught his wife cheating. It wasn't when they stopped saying "I love you." It was when he stood in his own kitchen and said 5 simple words. "Baby, I got fired today." And instead of reaching for him, instead of asking if he was okay, his wife Vanessa blinked once, and you could literally see the calculator turn on behind her eyes. Her gaze didn't land on her husband's face. It landed on the numbers, the mortgage payment, the $401k balance, the life insurance policy, the 5-year anniversary that was exactly 7 months away. In that moment, Marcus realized something that hurt worse than any termination letter ever could. This woman wasn't his partner. She was his accountant, a bad one, and she'd been planning to cash out. But here's the thing. Marcus hadn't been fired at all. It was a test his wife failed so spectacularly that what he overheard her say on the phone 30 minutes later would blow up her entire strategy, expose her best friend's role in the scheme, and prove that the woman he'd been sleeping next to for almost 5 years had stopped seeing him as a husband about a year ago. She'd been counting down, waiting, calculating, and Marcus had just flipped the entire game board. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Before we get into the fallout, before we talk about what Marcus overheard that night, before we reveal how Vanessa's entire plan came crashing down, you need to understand something. From the outside, Marcus and Vanessa Bennett looked normal. Actually, they looked good. Marcus was 34, a senior project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. Good benefits, solid salary, nothing flashy but steady. The kind of job that lets you sleep at night knowing the bills are covered. Vanessa was 31, a part-time fitness instructor at one of those boutique gyms where classes cost $30 and everyone's wearing matching Lululemon. She worked maybe 20 hours a week, taught spin classes and HIIT sessions, had that whole wellness influencer aesthetic going on Instagram. They had a 2-bedroom townhouse in a decent neighborhood on the east side of Charlotte. Beige walls, furniture from West Elm and Target, that one squeaky floorboard in the hallway that they kept meaning to fix, but never did. They did date nights at places like Firebirds and Texas Roadhouse, watched crime documentaries on Netflix, went to cookouts with Marcus's family where his uncle would overcook the ribs and everybody would pretend they were perfect. They smiled for pictures at weddings, posted anniversary tributes on social media with captions about being blessed and growing together. From the outside, they looked like any other young black couple in Charlotte, trying to build something real. Nothing about them screamed disaster waiting to happen. But that's the thing about some storms. They don't start with thunder and lightning. They start quiet. With small shifts you don't notice until you're already soaking wet. They start with questions. Questions Marcus didn't ask out loud at first, but that kept him awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling. Why was Vanessa suddenly so obsessed with his retirement accounts? She'd never cared about that stuff before. For the first 3 years of their marriage, when he'd try to talk about their financial planning, she'd wave him off and say, "Numbers give me a headache." But lately, she'd been asking specific questions. How much is in your 401k now? What's the vested amount? If something happened, am I the beneficiary on everything? At first, Marcus thought maybe she was just maturing, getting more responsible about their future. But something about the way she asked felt off. Too calculated, too focused. Why did she tense up every time his mother's name appeared on his phone? His mama would call maybe twice a week. Normal stuff, checking in, asking if they were coming to Sunday dinner. But Vanessa started getting this look whenever she heard his phone ring and saw Mom on the screen. Her jaw would tighten. She'd leave the room. Once, she'd even snapped, "Does your mother have to be all up in our business all the time?" His mother hadn't done anything, hadn't said anything disrespectful, but Vanessa treated her like an enemy. Why did Vanessa start moving her clothes into the guest room? She claimed she needed more space for her workout gear, that the master bedroom closet was too small for both of them. But Marcus noticed she wasn't just moving athletic wear, she was moving her nice dresses, her shoes, her jewelry. Little by little, she was creating a separate space, a separate life. And why, on that afternoon 3 weeks ago when Marcus came home early with a headache, did he hear his wife say to her best friend Tasha, "Once we hit that 5-year mark, the alimony hits different"? That sentence, those 9 words, they'd been playing on repeat in Marcus's head for 21 days straight. He'd tried to convince himself he'd misheard. Maybe she'd said something else. Maybe it was about someone else's marriage. Some mutual friend going through a divorce. But deep down, he knew. He knew exactly what she meant. What really happened in that house? When did the woman who'd stood in front of their families and friends and promised to love him for better or worse decide that worse wasn't worth sticking around for? When did she start seeing him as a financial asset instead of a husband? When did their marriage become a countdown? Why was she waiting for 5 years like it was a finish line, like it was payday, like it was the moment she could finally cash in her chips and walk away? And when Marcus finally put her to the test, when he walked through that door and lied about losing his job, when he watched her face cycle through emotions in real time, did she fail because she was cold-blooded and calculating? Or did she fail because something had broken inside her long before she ever met him? Because here's what you need to understand about this story. It's not simple. It's not just about a gold-digger wife and an innocent husband. It's messier than that. It's about 2 people who stopped being honest with each other. About a woman who let bitterness from her past poison her future. About a man who chose to test his wife instead of confronting her directly. About a best friend who planted seeds of toxicity disguised as advice. It's about what happens when fear of vulnerability makes us treat the people we're supposed to love like adversaries. When we start protecting ourselves from intimacy instead of leaning into it. This story is about consequences, real ones. The kind that don't just affect the 2 people in the marriage, but ripple outward and touch everyone connected to them. Stay with me, because what Marcus overheard after Vanessa went upstairs to call Tasha, what was captured on that recording in his jacket pocket, it didn't just confirm his suspicions. It revealed a plan, a detailed, calculated, months-in-the-making plan. And when that plan fell apart, when Vanessa got served with divorce papers she never saw coming, the fallout was bigger than either of them could have imagined. Marcus Bennett wasn't the type of man women write romance novels about. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He wasn't out here flexing in designer clothes or driving a Mercedes with custom rims. He was that good, regular man a lot of women say they want, until their girlfriends start posting vacation pictures from Dubai and suddenly regular doesn't feel like enough anymore. Marcus was the kind of man who showed up. 9 to 5, never late. Paid his bills on time. Every time. Didn't cheat. Didn't lie. Didn't have a secret second family in another city. Called his mama every Sunday after church. Brought his lunch to work in the same blue Tupperware container for 4 years straight. Turkey sandwich and baby carrots. Because he was saving money for their future. He met Vanessa on a Saturday afternoon at his boy Darnell's backyard cookout on the west side of Charlotte. It was one of those perfect late summer days. Blue sky, music playing, the smell of ribs and hot links on the grill. Vanessa was over by the folding table, laughing with Darnell's cousin about something, wearing black leggings and an oversized Carolina Panthers hoodie. She had that easy smile, that natural glow that some women just have. The kind of woman who drinks green smoothies and does yoga at sunrise and makes it look effortless. Marcus had been standing by the cooler, grabbing a beer, when Darnell walked up and nudged him. "Yo, that's my girl Keisha's roommate. Vanessa. She teaches at that new gym downtown. You should go talk to her." Marcus had hesitated. He wasn't the smooth-talking type, didn't have games like some of his friends, but something about the way Vanessa laughed, the way she seemed completely comfortable in her own skin, made him walk over. "Hey, I'm Marcus," he'd said, extending his hand. She'd turned, looked him up and down once, and smiled. "Vanessa, you're Darnell's friend from work, right?" They'd talked for 2 hours that day. About everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Durham, about her dream of one day opening her own wellness studio, about how she'd moved to Charlotte 3 years ago to get away from her ex-boyfriend, who couldn't hold down a job. He told her about his work in construction management, about how he'd worked his way up from being a site coordinator to project manager, about his goal of one day running his own firm. They were opposites, in a lot of ways. Marcus was spreadsheets and scheduled oil changes and having a 5-year plan. Vanessa was essential oils and manifestation journals, and the universe will provide. But for a while, that balance worked. It worked beautifully. Marcus loved that Vanessa slowed him down. She got him into trying new things. Farmers markets on Saturday mornings where they'd buy overpriced organic vegetables. Meditation apps that he'd use for exactly 3 days before forgetting about them. She even convinced him to try hot yoga once, and he'd nearly passed out 15 minutes in, stumbled out of that studio sweating like he'd run a marathon, while Vanessa laughed and handed him a coconut water. She made life feel lighter, less rigid, less about checking boxes, and more about experiencing moments. And Vanessa loved that Marcus was solid. Paycheck every 2 weeks, direct deposit. Never a question of whether the money would be there. Health insurance, dental, vision, a 401k that he actually contributed to. A car that didn't break down every 6 weeks like her old Honda Civic that she'd finally gotten rid of. Marcus represented stability, something Vanessa had never really had growing up. Her parents had divorced when she was 12, messy and loud, her father leaving her mother with nothing but debt and broken promises. She'd watched her mother work 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, watched her cry over bills spread across the kitchen table, watched her eventually give up on the idea that life could be anything other than survival. Vanessa had promised herself she'd never end up like that. Never financially dependent. Never trapped. Never blindsided. When Marcus proposed after 2 years of dating, Vanessa said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends at a little venue in uptown Charlotte. Vanessa's mother cried during the vows, probably thinking about her own failed marriage, about all the promises that hadn't been kept. Marcus's mother had pulled Vanessa aside at the reception and said, "You take care of my baby? You hear? He's got a good heart. Don't break it." Vanessa had hugged her and promised she wouldn't. They had a DJ who played all the classics: Frankie Beverly and Mays, Mary J. Blige, Luther Vandross. People ate, danced, wiped tears when the officiant said, "For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health." Nobody knew that years later, Vanessa would be keeping receipts on exactly what better was worth. Nobody knew she'd be calculating the value of richer. The first 2 years of marriage were fine. Not perfect, not the fairy tales some people post about on social media. But fine. Real. They had their routines. Marcus would leave for work at 7 in the morning, come home around 6. Vanessa taught morning classes at the gym, had her afternoons free. They'd have dinner together most nights. Watch TV. Talk about their days. They split the bills in a way that made sense. Marcus covered the mortgage and utilities because his income was higher. Vanessa covered groceries and her share of household expenses. Money wasn't a big discussion between them. It just worked. Marcus had his 401k from before they met, an investment account he'd been building since his mid-20s when he first started making decent money. Vanessa had some student loan debt from her fitness certifications, and a dream that one day, when they had more saved up, she'd open her own studio. A place that wasn't just about fitness but about holistic wellness, mental health, community. Marcus supported that dream. Told her they'd make it happen when the time was right. But somewhere in year 3, the energy changed. It was subtle at first, like a shift in temperature that you don't notice until you're shivering. It started with little comments Vanessa would make. "Must be nice, your job pays for everything," she'd say when Marcus mentioned putting extra money into savings. Not in a joking way, in a way that had an edge to it. "I just feel behind, Marcus. Like I'll never catch up financially, she'd said one night while scrolling through Instagram, looking at other fitness influencers with their own studios and brand partnerships. You know Tasha's friend Monica? She just went through a divorce and walked away with 6 figures. At least she got something back for all those years she put in. Ness, marriage isn't supposed to be an investment portfolio. I'm just saying, Vanessa had replied, not looking at him. At least she didn't waste her time. Lord have mercy. Any time somebody starts measuring marriage in billable hours, talking about time wasted and returns on investment, you need to brace yourself, because that person has already left emotionally. They're just waiting for the right moment to leave physically. Marcus had brushed it off at first. Everybody vents, right? Everybody says things they don't mean when they're frustrated or comparing themselves to others on social media. But then Vanessa started asking specific questions. Questions that felt less like casual curiosity and more like an audit. So, how much exactly is in your 401k now? She'd asked one Sunday morning while they were having coffee. I don't know. Maybe 90,000? Marcus had replied. Why? Just curious. And that investment account you had before we got married? What's in that? Around 45,000. Why are you asking? I'm just trying to understand our full financial picture, Marcus. We're married. We're supposed to be a team. Why is all that stuff just in your name? He'd felt something tighten in his chest. Because I built it before we met, Ness. I worked 60-hour weeks for years to save that money. It's not about you, it's just how it's always been. Right, she'd said, her voice going flat. How it's always been. So basically you don't trust me. That's not what I said. You didn't have to. She'd given him the silent treatment for the rest of that day. Marcus wasn't stingy. He wasn't hoarding money or keeping secrets. He just paid attention. That investment account represented years of sacrifice. Years of living in a tiny studio apartment with furniture from Goodwill. Years of saying no to trips with his boys because he was saving. Years of driving a beat-up Honda with a missing hubcap and a check engine light that stayed on permanently. He'd built that security for himself. By himself. Long before Vanessa came into his life. And something about the way she was suddenly fixated on it felt wrong. Not arguing cold. Worse. She went silent. Started doing that thing where she'd clank dishes a little too hard when she was loading the dishwasher. Where she'd answer his questions with one-word responses, where she'd go to bed without saying goodnight. One night, after a week of this treatment, Marcus finally asked, Vanessa, what's really going on? Why are you so upset about this? She'd turned on him, eyes flashing. Do you not trust me? After everything I've done for you? After I moved into your place, adjusted my whole life to fit yours? Supported your career? Marcus had wanted to say, done what exactly? What have you sacrificed? But he'd swallowed it. Because that's how good people get caught up. They keep choosing peace, keep avoiding confrontation, keep giving in to keep the household calm. While the other person quietly starts planning war. The real crack in the foundation showed up on a random Thursday afternoon. Marcus had been at a construction site in South Charlotte, doing a walkthrough with a contractor, when a migraine hit him out of nowhere, the kind that makes light feel like knives in your skull. He'd told his team he was heading home early, drove back to the townhouse with sunglasses on even though the sun wasn't that bright. When he opened the front door, he heard Vanessa's voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone. Her voice low but sharp. In that way people talk when they think they're alone, when they feel safe talking trash. Marcus had stopped in the entryway, keys still in his hand. He heard Tasha's name. He heard his own salary. He heard the word alimony. Look, Tash, my lawyer said once we hit 5 years, the calculations change completely. I just have to be smart about this. I'm not walking away with nothing after all this. Not after everything I've put up with. Marcus felt his blood go cold. Vanessa had caught herself mid-sentence when she heard his keys jingling. By the time he stepped into the kitchen, she was all smiles. Phone pressed to her ear. Hey babe, you're home early. Everything okay?" Her voice had that fake, bright quality, like a customer service representative. "Yeah. Just got a bad headache," Marcus had said, watching her face carefully. "I'm gonna take some Advil and lie down." "Okay. Feel better?" Vanessa had chirped, then returned to her call. "Sorry, Tash. Yeah, like I was saying, I'll call you later." Marcus had gone upstairs, taken the Advil, and laid down in their bed in the dark. But it wasn't the migraine bothering him anymore. It was the math. The cold, hard math that was now impossible to ignore. They'd been married 4 years and 8 months. Vanessa had said, "Once we hit 5 years." She'd said, "My lawyer. Not our counselor. Not our therapist. Not someone who can help us work through our problems. My lawyer." She'd said, "I'm not walking away with nothing after all this." After all what? After all this marriage she'd apparently been enduring. After all this time she'd been putting up with him. She was talking about waiting. About timing. About calculations. Not about love. Not about fixing what was broken. Not about communication or compromise or any of the things people do when they actually want to save a marriage. Just timing. Strategic positioning. And that was the moment this story turned. That was the moment Marcus realized he didn't know if his wife loved him, or if she loved the number at the bottom of his pay stub. If she saw him as her partner, or as her exit strategy. If the woman lying next to him every night was building a future with him, or building a case against him. Marcus did something that night that a lot of men don't do. He got help. He didn't sit on it, didn't let pride or shame keep him silent. The next morning, he called his boy Jerome from work, a guy who'd gone through a messy divorce 3 years earlier. "Jay. The one who handled your divorce." "Patricia Morrison," Jerome had said immediately. "She's not cheap, but she's worth every penny." "Why? What's going on?" "I'll tell you later. Just send me her info." That's how Marcus ended up sitting in Patricia Morrison's office 2 days later. Patricia was a black woman in her mid-40s, with long box braids, designer glasses, and the kind of calm, measured presence that told you she'd seen every version of this story before. Her office was in uptown Charlotte, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, law books lining one wall, framed degrees from Howard University and Duke Law on another. Marcus sat across from her at a large mahogany desk and laid everything out. The overheard phone call, the questions about his 401k and investment account, the 5-year timeline, the fact that Vanessa had apparently already consulted with a lawyer without telling him. Patricia listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under her chin, her expression neutral. When Marcus finished, she was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "Marcus, what you're describing is called strategic positioning. It's more common than you'd think. If your wife is planning to file for divorce, she's likely been advised to wait until you cross that 5-year threshold. In North Carolina, the duration of the marriage can significantly impact alimony calculations. Not always." Marcus felt sick. "So what do I do? Just wait around for her to serve me papers when she's ready?" "No," Patricia said firmly. "You need proof. Not suspicions. Not assumptions. Documentation. Because if this goes to court, and you're claiming she stayed in the marriage for financial strategy, you need evidence to back that up. Otherwise, it's just he said she said, and judges don't like that." "How do I get proof?" Marcus asked. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying him. "People show you who they really are when they think the safety net is gone. When they think the money has disappeared. If you want to know your wife's true intentions, if you want to know whether she's with you, or for what you provide, you need to create a scenario where she thinks the financial benefit is no longer there." "You're saying I should test her?" Marcus asked slowly. "I'm saying you should give her an opportunity to reveal her true priorities," Patricia corrected. "And document the results. North Carolina is a one-party consent state for recording, which means you can record conversations you're part of without the other person's knowledge. If you're in your own home and you overhear a conversation, you can document that as well, as long as you're present in the residence. Marcus sat there for a long moment, processing. It felt manipulative. It felt wrong. But then again, what Vanessa was apparently doing, meeting with lawyers behind his back, waiting for a specific timeline to maximize her financial gain, that felt pretty wrong too. What would I even say? Marcus asked. Patricia's expression didn't change. That's up to you. But if I were in your position, I'd consider telling her you lost your job. See how she reacts. See what she does. See who she calls and what she says when she thinks you can't hear her. People's true character comes out when they think the money is gone. Marcus had left that office with his mind racing. Over the next week, he'd thought about it constantly. Was this the right move? Was he being paranoid? Should he just confront Vanessa directly and ask her what was going on? But every time he considered confronting her, he remembered that phone call. My lawyer said once we hit 5 years. That wasn't the language of someone who wanted to fix their marriage. That was the language of someone who was already gone, just waiting for the right time to make it official. So, Marcus made his decision. He wasn't testing Vanessa for fun. He wasn't playing games. He was giving her a very simple, very clear test. If the money vanished, if the financial stability disappeared, if he was no longer the steady paycheck she'd come to depend on, would she still choose him? Would she still stand by him? Would she still be his wife? Or would she reveal that the marriage had been a transaction all along? Marcus set up his phone to record audio and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he drove home from work, rehearsing those 5 words over and over. Baby, I got fired today. He was about to find out exactly who he was married to. A week after his meeting with Patricia Morrison, after days of rehearsing in his mind, after losing sleep playing out every possible scenario, Marcus sat in his car in the driveway of his own home and set his phone to record. His hands were shaking slightly as he pressed the button. North Carolina is a one-party consent state. Patricia had explained it clearly during their follow-up meeting. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can legally record it. And if that conversation happens in your own home while you're present, even if you're just in the next room, that's documentation. That's evidence that will hold up. Marcus took a deep breath, stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, and whispered to himself one more time, Baby, I got fired today. 5 words that were about to change everything. He grabbed the fake termination letter he'd created. He'd spent 2 hours making it look authentic, using his company's actual letterhead that he'd pulled from an old document, forging his boss's signature, making up details about budget cuts and department eliminations. It looked real enough that if you didn't know better, you'd believe it completely. Marcus slipped his phone into his jacket pocket, recording still running, and walked inside. Vanessa was on the couch, feet tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. Some reality show was playing on the TV in the background, one of those housewives shows she watched religiously. She looked up when he entered, and Marcus saw it immediately. That flash of mild annoyance, like he'd interrupted something important, like his presence in his own home was an inconvenience. You're home early, she said, not putting her phone down. Marcus set his messenger bag on the floor and placed the fake termination letter on the kitchen counter like it weighed 100 pounds. His hands were trembling, but not from nervousness anymore, from anticipation, from knowing he was about to see the truth. Vanessa, we need to talk, he said, his voice lower than usual. She must have heard something in his tone because she finally looked up from her phone, really looked at him. She muted the TV. Okay, you're kind of scaring me. What's going on? Marcus let his shoulders sag, let his face fall into an expression of defeat. He'd practiced this in the mirror. They let me go today. Budget cuts. My whole department got eliminated. I'm fired, Ness. I'm out of a job. The silence that followed wasn't the kind you'd expect from a wife hearing that her husband just lost his livelihood. It wasn't the, oh my God, are you okay? It wasn't the, come here, let me hold you silence. It was the calculating kind. The kind where you can almost hear the gears turning. Marcus watched Vanessa's face in real time. Her mouth parted slightly. Her eyes narrowed, but not in concern, not in sympathy. In math. She was doing math. Right there on the couch, in her Lululemon leggings and oversized sweatshirt, his wife was calculating numbers. How long do we have? She finally asked, her voice tight. Like, what's the severance situation? Marcus swallowed hard. Staying in character. 3 months of pay. That's it. After that, it's just whatever unemployment I can get, which won't be much. And your income from the gym. We're going to have to tighten up significantly, Vanessa. Cut expenses. We might even have to sell the townhouse. That's when the color drained from her face. Not slowly. All at once. Like someone had pulled a plug. Sell the house? Her voice went up an octave. Marcus. We can't just, where would we even... We might not have a choice, Marcus said quietly, watching her carefully. The mortgage is $1,800 a month. Without my income, we can't sustain that. And that investment account I have? The one you've been asking about? I'm probably going to have to drain it just to keep us afloat while I look for something new. The job market is terrible right now for project managers. Marcus watched his wife's jaw clench. But it wasn't clenching in solidarity. It wasn't the jaw clench of a partner preparing to face hardship together. It was disappointment. Pure, undisguised disappointment. Like someone had just told her the scratch-off lottery ticket she'd been counting on was worthless. Like she'd been banking on a payout that just evaporated. Vanessa stood up suddenly, almost stumbling over her own feet. I need a minute. I need to call Tasha. I need to talk to someone about this. Of course, Tasha. The best friend. The one whose name Marcus had heard on that phone call 3 weeks ago. Marcus nodded, playing the defeated husband perfectly. Yeah, okay. I'll be in the study. I need to start looking at our finances anyway. Figure out how long we can really last. Vanessa grabbed her phone and practically ran upstairs to their bedroom. Marcus heard the door close. He waited 30 seconds, counting them in his head. 30 seconds to make sure she felt safe, felt alone, felt like she could speak freely. Then he quietly climbed the stairs, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He positioned himself just outside their bedroom door, his back against the hallway wall. The phone in his jacket pocket was still recording. He could hear Vanessa's voice through the door, sharp and urgent. Tash, we have a serious problem. Marcus just told me he got fired. There was a pause as Tasha responded. No, I'm not joking. Yes. Literally just now, he just walked in and told me. This messes up everything, Tasha. Everything we planned. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Everything we planned. Vanessa continued, her voice getting more frantic. If he's unemployed when we separate, the alimony calculation is based on unemployment benefits and whatever basic job he finds next. I could end up with almost nothing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Another pause. Marcus could barely breathe. We're 7 months away from 5 years, Tasha. 7 months. I can't sit here pretending to be happy with him, pretending everything's fine, while he's broke and unemployed for 7 more months. My lawyer specifically said the alimony calculation is based on his income at the time of separation. What if he never gets back to what he's making now? What if he ends up in some $60,000 job? Then I've waited all this time for nothing. Marcus felt something inside him crack. Not break. Crack. Like ice on a frozen lake. That sound right before everything gives way. Vanessa's voice dropped lower, but Marcus could still hear every word. No, I'm not filing now. Are you crazy? Then what was the point of waiting this long? We had it all mapped out. Remember? The townhouse has about $34,000 in equity. His 401k, last he told me, has around $90,000 in it. That investment account he's so protective of? There's at least $45,000 in there. Split all that, plus 3 years of alimony based on his current $90,000 salary. Tasha. I was walking away with close to $200,000 total. That was the plan. That's what I've been waiting for. Now? Now I don't even know if it's worth staying." At that word, Marcus closed his eyes. Not worth saving the marriage. Not worth fighting for. Not worth going to counseling. Worth staying long enough to collect. Worth enduring for the payout. But Vanessa wasn't done. What came next was the dagger. The words that would replay in Marcus's head for months. "I stopped loving him about a year ago anyway, if I'm being honest. He's boring, Tash. He comes home from work, watches the game or whatever's on TV, talks about his projects and his coworkers like I care, goes to bed by 10 like he's somebody's grandfather. The money was what I was owed for putting up with 4 years of mediocrity, for playing the supportive wife role, for pretending, 4 years, putting up with him, playing a role, pretending." Marcus heard Tasha's muffled response through the phone, something about being patient, about thinking it through. I know, Vanessa said. "I'm not going to do anything stupid. I just need to figure out if it makes more sense to cut my losses now or wait it out and hope he gets another decent job before the 5-year mark. Let me call my lawyer tomorrow and see what she says. Maybe there's still a way to make this work in my favor." Marcus didn't wait to hear anything else. He couldn't. His legs felt weak, his hands were shaking, and there was a ringing in his ears that had nothing to do with sound. He walked back downstairs carefully, quietly, like a man in a dream, or a nightmare. He stopped the recording on his phone, sat down at the desk in the study, and stared at nothing for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes. Some words don't just hurt. They don't just sting or bruise. They rearrange you. They change the architecture of who you thought you were and what you thought you had. Marcus had suspected. He'd had doubts. He'd heard enough 3 weeks ago to know something was wrong, but hearing it all laid out, hearing the dollar amounts, hearing his wife calculate their marriage like a business transaction, hearing her admit she'd stopped loving him a year ago but stayed anyway for the money. His wife wasn't just planning to leave him. She'd turned him into a paycheck with a countdown timer, and as messed up as it sounds, as much as it hurt, the recording gave Marcus something back, something he'd lost over the past year of watching Vanessa pull away, of questioning himself, of wondering if he was being paranoid or controlling or unfair. The recording gave him clarity. Cold, brutal, undeniable clarity. The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work. He actually felt sick, hadn't slept more than 2 hours, spent most of the night sitting in the guest room, replaying that recording over and over, making sure he hadn't misheard, making sure it was as bad as he thought. It was worse. He drove to Patricia Morrison's office first thing. She was waiting for him, coffee already made, her expression serious. "Play it," she said simply. Marcus pulled out his phone and hit play. They sat in silence as Vanessa's voice filled the office. "We had it all mapped out. I was walking away with close to 200,000. I stopped loving him about a year ago. The money was what I was owed for putting up with 4 years of mediocrity." Halfway through, Patricia exhaled slowly and leaned back in her chair. When the recording ended, she was quiet for a moment, then looked at Marcus with something close to sympathy. "This is legally significant," she said carefully. "I know it hurts, Marcus. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but from a legal standpoint, what your wife just admitted to is called economic opportunism." She explicitly stated that she stayed in the marriage for financial benefit, that she's been calculating asset division and alimony, that she's been timing her exit strategy based on maximizing her settlement. This recording can absolutely be used to argue against alimony. It might even eliminate it entirely. At minimum, it gives us serious leverage in settlement negotiations. Marcus stared at his hands. They looked like his hands, but they felt foreign. Everything felt foreign. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Patricia leaned forward, her expression shifting into lawyer mode. "Now, we protect you. First, today, you're going to go to the bank and move half of any joint savings or checking accounts into an account in only your name. That's your legal right as a joint account holder. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets get divided fairly, not necessarily equally, but you have every right to protect your share. Second, Patricia continued, pulling out a form, you're going to change your beneficiaries. Life insurance, 401k, any retirement accounts, change them today. Remove Vanessa's name and put your mother or a sibling or whoever you trust, because if something happened to you tomorrow and Vanessa is still listed as the beneficiary, she gets everything, even if you're in the middle of a divorce. Marcus nodded slowly. And third, Patricia said, and something in her tone made Marcus look up. We file first. We file for divorce before she does. Marcus blinked. File first? But she thinks I just lost my job. She's probably going to wait, right? She said 7 more months. Exactly, Patricia said. Vanessa thinks she's controlling the timeline. She thinks she has 7 more months to position herself, to wait and see if you get another high-paying job, to maximize her potential settlement. We're going to pull the rug out from under her. We're going to file this week. But won't she figure out I set her up? That I never really got fired? Absolutely, Patricia said. And that's fine. By the time she figures it out, the divorce will already be in motion. She'll be playing defense instead of offense. She'll be reacting to your moves instead of executing her plan. Marcus sat there processing. It felt aggressive. It felt ruthless. But then again, what Vanessa had been doing, meeting with a lawyer for months, calculating his net worth, staying in a marriage she'd checked out of just to maximize her payout, that was pretty ruthless too. There's one more thing, Patricia said, her voice softer now. For the next few days, maybe the rest of this week, you need to keep up the act. You need to still be the husband who just lost his job. You cannot tip your hand. Can you do that? Can you act? Marcus looked Patricia Morrison in the eye and felt something cold and resolute settle in his chest. After what I heard on that recording? After hearing my wife say she's been putting up with me for 4 years? Oh, I can act. By the end of that week, Marcus had done everything Patricia told him to do. He'd gone to the bank and moved $21,000, exactly half of their joint savings, into a new account in only his name. The bank teller had processed it without question. It was his legal right. He'd called his 401k provider and changed the beneficiary from Vanessa to his mother. He'd called his life insurance company and done the same. Vanessa's name was removed from everything. And on Wednesday afternoon, Marcus sat in Patricia's office and signed the divorce papers. His hand was steady. He didn't hesitate. Patricia filed them with the court that same day. On Thursday at 2:47 in the afternoon, while Vanessa was teaching a spin class at her gym, a process server walked into the studio. Marcus knew the exact time because Patricia had texted him. It's done. She's been served. The process server, a middle-aged white woman in business casual, had waited until Vanessa finished correcting a student's form, then walked up to her with a manila envelope. Vanessa Bennett? Yes? Vanessa had looked confused, probably thinking it was some kind of promotional thing or a new client inquiry. You've been served. The woman handed her the envelope and walked out. Vanessa had apparently opened it right there in the hallway outside the studio in front of one of her students who was leaving class early. Marcus heard about this later from Patricia, who heard it from the process server. Vanessa's face had gone through a progression: confusion as she pulled out the papers, shock as she read the first page, horror as she realized what she was holding, and then fury. Pure, unfiltered fury. At 3:15, Marcus's phone rang. He was sitting at his actual desk at his actual job that he'd never lost, looking out at the parking lot where construction vehicles were lined up. He let the phone ring 4 times, watched Vanessa's name flash on the screen. Then he answered, "Hello? What is this?" Vanessa's voice was shaking with rage. Not sadness, not confusion, rage. "I just got served with divorce papers, Marcus." "Divorce papers? You got fired 2 days ago, and now you're divorcing me?" Have you lost your mind? What is happening? Marcus leaned back in his office chair, and for the first time in a week, he felt something close to calm. Actually, Vanessa, I didn't get fired. Silence. Complete. Total silence. What? Her voice was smaller now. I lied. I still have my job. I made the whole thing up. The termination letter. The severance. All of it. I made it up. What are you? Vanessa was sputtering now, trying to process. It was a test, Marcus said simply. To see if you loved me, or if you loved the lifestyle. To see if you were my wife or my accountant. To see what you'd do if the money disappeared. He let the silence stretch, let her sit with that for a moment, then added, and you failed, Vanessa. You failed so completely that I almost feel bad for you. How dare you, she hissed. What gives you the right to test me, to manipulate me like that? And wait, did you record me? Is that how you… Oh, so you figured it out, Marcus said quietly. Yeah. I recorded you. I heard every word of your conversation with Tasha. Every word about waiting for 5 years. Every dollar amount you calculated. Every time you said what you were owed. Every time you called our marriage mediocre. My lawyer has it all. Vanessa, every single word. Marcus, that was a private conversation. That was my marriage you were itemizing like a grocery receipt. Marcus interrupted, his voice harder now. That was my life you were turning into a business transaction. You played a game, Vanessa. You played it for months. Maybe over a year. You just didn't realize I'd already sat down at the table. Vanessa was crying now. Or maybe just breathing hard. Marcus couldn't tell. This isn't fair. You tricked me. You manipulated me into showing me who you really are? Marcus finished. Yeah, I did. And I'm not sorry. He hung up, sat there for a moment, phone in his hand, and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not happiness. Not victory. Just relief. Relief that he finally knew the truth. Relief that he wasn't crazy for suspecting. Relief that he'd protected himself before it was too late. But if Marcus thought that phone call was the end of the story, if he thought Vanessa would just accept the divorce quietly and move on, he was wrong. Because what happened next? What Vanessa did in the weeks following, what came out about her best friend Tasha, and what Marcus discovered about the real reason his wife had changed, all of that was still coming, and it was going to get messier than anyone could have predicted. If this story has your heart racing, comment, I'm still watching so we know you're here for the full truth. Because what happens next will show you that sometimes the person you think you know best is really just a stranger wearing a familiar face. Vanessa did what a lot of people do when they realize the script just flipped on them. When they realize they're no longer the one calling the shots. She tried to rewrite the narrative. She tried to make herself the victim. When Marcus finally came back to the townhouse that Saturday, to talk in person, to handle some logistics about bills and property, Vanessa was waiting for him, not crying, not apologetic, waiting like she was preparing for battle. She was sitting at the kitchen table, divorce papers spread out in front of her like a war map, her laptop open, notes scribbled on a legal pad. She'd clearly been strategizing with her attorney. When Marcus walked in, she didn't even look up at first. Just kept her arms folded, her jaw set, her whole body language screaming that she was not about to roll over. I talked to my attorney, Vanessa said, her voice cold and measured. She says that recording you made might not even be admissible in court. North Carolina has complicated consent laws, and the fact that you deliberately set me up, that you manipulated the situation to make me react a certain way, that could be seen as entrapment. Marcus set his keys down on the counter and sat across from her at the table. He was calm in a way that clearly unsettled her. Calm in a way that said he'd already processed his anger and come out the other side. Okay, Marcus said simply. Let's say the recording isn't admissible. I can still testify under oath about what I heard. And you'll have to testify too. And you'll either have to commit perjury or admit that yes, you were meeting with a divorce attorney for months. Yes, you were waiting for the 5-year mark. Yes, You calculated down to the dollar what you thought you'd walk away with. So which one are you going with, Vanessa? Perjury or the truth? She flinched, looked away. And another thing, Marcus continued, his voice still eerily calm. You want to talk about humiliation? About how I blindsided you? About how some stranger served you divorce papers in front of your students at the gym? He leaned forward slightly. I know what it feels like to be blindsided, Vanessa. I know what it feels like to come home early with a headache and overhear your wife on the phone calculating how much money she's going to get when she leaves you. I know what it feels like to realize the woman you've been sleeping next to every night stopped loving you a year ago but stayed anyway because she was waiting for a payout. I got my entire marriage revealed as a lie. I think we're even. Vanessa's eyes flickered. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different approach. You went through my credit card statements? You spied on me? I went through my life, Marcus corrected. And those statements don't lie. Every other Tuesday for 3 months, lunch at that little Italian place right next door to Sterling and Associates Family Law. You weren't just venting to Tasha about your feelings. You were strategizing with a lawyer. You were building a case. You were planning an exit while I was still trying to plan our future. Vanessa looked like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle, so she switched tactics again. This time her voice shook, and Marcus couldn't tell if it was genuine emotion or performance. I gave up my career for you, Marcus. I could have built a full-time client base at the gym. I could have gone for that management position, but I chose to support you instead, to keep my schedule flexible so I could be there for you, so I could handle things at home while you focused on your work. And this is how you repay me? Marcus almost laughed. Almost. But the situation was too sad for laughter. Vanessa, you were working 20 hours a week when we met. 20 hours. You chose that schedule because you liked having your afternoons free. You liked having time to go to brunch with Tasha, to take those long walks, to work on your wellness blog that you posted maybe twice a month. I never asked you to work less. Actually, I encouraged you to work more if you wanted to. Remember when that boutique gym in South End offered you a full-time position with benefits? Remember how you turned it down because you said you didn't want to be tied down to a corporate environment? He shook his head. You didn't sacrifice your dream job for me, Vanessa. You didn't give up some thriving career. You just didn't build one. And that's fine. That was your choice. But don't sit here now and act like you were some devoted wife who put her ambitions on hold for the sake of our marriage. That's not what happened, and we both know it. Vanessa's mask slipped for just a moment. The righteous anger, the victim routine, all of it cracked, and Marcus saw what was underneath. Fear. Not fear of him. Fear of her new reality. Fear of being alone. Fear of having to actually support herself on her income alone. What do you want from me, Marcus? She asked. Her voice flat now, all the performance drained out. What's your endgame here? Marcus pulled a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. This is my settlement offer. My attorney drew it up. You can have your lawyer review it, but the terms are non-negotiable. Vanessa snatched up the folder and started flipping through the pages. Marcus watched her eyes scan the contents, watched her expression shift from guarded to disbelief to rage. This is insulting, she said, her voice rising. This is nothing. You're offering me basically nothing. I'm offering you exactly what you're entitled to under North Carolina law, Marcus corrected. We split the equity in the townhouse. After we pay off the mortgage and closing costs, that's about $17,000 each. You keep your car. I keep mine. You keep your retirement account. I keep mine. We each keep our individual investment accounts, since we maintained them separately throughout the marriage. And no alimony, given the documented evidence that you stayed in this marriage as a financial strategy, rather than out of genuine affection or commitment. No judge is going to agree to zero alimony, Vanessa protested. I'm entitled to something. I was your wife for almost 5 years. You were my wife in name only for at least the last year, Marcus replied. You said it yourself on that recording. You stopped loving me a year ago. You were putting up with me, enduring me, waiting for the clock to run out so you could maximize your settlement. No judge is going to reward that behavior with alimony, especially when we have documentation of your intent." Vanessa stared at him, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Marcus saw tears in her eyes. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind. The kind that come from realizing you've lost. "I walked into this marriage expecting partnership," she said quietly. "I'm not walking away empty-handed after 4 years." "You walked into this marriage expecting a husband," Marcus said, his voice softer now but no less firm. "Somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your partner and started seeing me as your retirement plan. You spent the last year of our marriage treating me like a severance package you were waiting to collect. I am not paying alimony to someone who admitted she stayed just long enough to maximize her payout. I'm not rewarding someone who called being married to me putting up with mediocrity. That's not how this works." Vanessa put her face in her hands. Marcus stood up. "My attorney will send the formal paperwork to yours. You have 2 weeks to respond." He walked toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Vanessa, I really did love you. I thought we were building a real life together. I'm sorry you didn't feel the same way." Patricia called Marcus with an update. Vanessa's attorney came back with a counteroffer. She wants $30,000 in cash plus 2 years of limited alimony at $1,500 a month. Essentially, she's asking for $66,000 total to walk away quietly. Marcus felt anger flare up again. "She's not entitled to that. She admitted on tape that she stayed for money." "I know," Patricia said calmly. "I already declined on your behalf. I told her attorney our offer stands. Split the house equity, keep individual assets, no alimony. If they want to fight it, we'll see them in court and let a judge listen to that recording. I also mentioned that if we go to court, we'll be filing a motion to recoup the legal fees given Vanessa's documented bad faith." There was a pause. Her attorney didn't respond well to that. "I think reality is starting to set in." "Good," Marcus said. He'd already taken most of his clothes and personal items, but now he rented a moving truck and got his furniture, his TV, his books, everything that was his. His boy Darnell and 2 other friends helped him load everything up on a Saturday morning. They worked in silence mostly. These men, who'd been at his wedding, who'd celebrated with him, who now were helping him dismantle his life. Marcus moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent complex on the south side of Charlotte. It wasn't fancy. Beige carpet, white walls, a small balcony that overlooked the parking lot. But it was his. He'd signed the lease in his name only, paid the deposit with his money. Nobody could take it. Nobody could calculate its value and demand half. The couch he'd gotten from his cousin wasn't as comfortable as the sectional he and Vanessa had picked out together at Ashley Furniture 3 years ago. The mattress was new but felt foreign. The whole place felt temporary, like a hotel room he was living in rather than a home. But it didn't smell like betrayal. It didn't carry the weight of lies and manipulation, and that was worth something. Work became Marcus's anchor during this time. He threw himself into his projects, staying late at the office, volunteering for extra assignments, anything to keep his mind occupied. He was working on a major commercial development, a mixed-use building in Uptown that required constant coordination with contractors, architects, city officials. The complexity of it was almost comforting. Problems at work had solutions. Budgets balanced or they didn't. Timelines were met or they weren't. Everything made sense in a way his personal life hadn't for months. He started going to the gym again. Not Vanessa's boutique place with the $30 classes and the Instagram-worthy aesthetic. A regular gym with squat racks and heavy bags, and men who grunted when they lifted. Marcus started lifting heavier than he had in years, pushing himself until his muscles burned and his mind went quiet. Started eating better too. Meal prepping on Sundays, tracking his protein, drinking water instead of beer. Not because Vanessa had ever asked him to, because he wanted to. Because taking care of himself felt like reclaiming something. Sleep came easier after a few weeks, though there were still nights when he'd wake up at 3 a.m. and reach for someone who wasn't there. Not because he missed Vanessa specifically, Because he missed the idea of her. The version of her he'd thought he married. The woman who'd laughed at his jokes and held his hand at cookouts and promised to build a life with him. That woman had never really existed. Or maybe she had, at the beginning, and had slowly been replaced by someone else. Someone calculating and cold. Someone who saw him as a means to an end. But healing isn't a straight line. Some days Marcus felt fine, strong even, confident that he'd made the right choice and dodged a bullet. Other days, reminders would hit him out of nowhere and knock the wind out of him. He'd be at the grocery store and see the brand of cereal Vanessa liked, the expensive organic kind that cost $7 a box, and he'd remember how they used to argue about it. It's cereal, Ness. It's not worth $7. It's healthier, Marcus. We should invest in our health. He'd drive past the movie theater, where they'd had their first real date, where they'd seen some romantic comedy that Marcus barely remembered but Vanessa had loved. He'd see the church his family attended, the one he and Vanessa had gone to exactly twice before deciding Sunday mornings were for sleeping in and brunch. Marcus would unblock Vanessa on Instagram, sometimes late at night when he couldn't sleep. He'd scroll through her recent posts, looking for clues about how she was handling everything. She'd moved into a smaller apartment on the east side, a one-bedroom in a complex that looked decent but nothing special. She was still teaching yoga classes, but fewer of them. Her posts had changed too. Less of the inspirational wellness content, the green smoothies and sunrise meditation photos. More of the raw, vulnerable posts about healing and growth and starting over. She looked different in the photos. Thinner, but not in the healthy, glowing way she used to. Stress thin. Tired thin. The kind of thin that comes from not eating because anxiety has killed your appetite. Marcus would look at these photos for 5, maybe 10 minutes. Wonder if she was okay. Wonder if she regretted what she'd done. Wonder if she ever really loved him at all, or if it had all been performance from day one. Then he'd block her again. Not out of cruelty or spite. Out of self-defense. Because looking at her, even through a screen, made him feel things he didn't want to feel. Made him remember things he was trying to forget. Made him question decisions he knew were right. Meanwhile, Vanessa's life had fact-checked her real quick. Reality had come knocking, and it wasn't pretty. Without Marcus's income, the townhouse they'd shared wasn't affordable. Even with her half of the equity, about $17,000 after everything was paid off, Vanessa couldn't swing the mortgage on her own. She tried to keep it initially, thinking she could rent out the second bedroom or pick up more classes at the gym. But the math didn't work. $1,800 a month for the mortgage, plus utilities, plus her car payment, plus insurance, plus groceries, plus all the little subscriptions and expenses she'd gotten used to having. Her yoga instructor income was maybe $2,000 a month on a good month. Selling the townhouse meant closing costs, realtor fees, moving expenses, deposits on a new place. By the time everything was settled, Vanessa's half of the equity was mostly gone. She'd moved into that one-bedroom apartment with barely any savings left. Her lawyer had done the math for her, laid it all out in black and white. Given the recording Marcus has, given your own statements about waiting for the 5-year mark and calculating asset division, I strongly advise you to accept his settlement offer. If we go to court, there's a significant chance you'll walk away with even less. The judge could rule that you acted in bad faith, that you stayed in the marriage under false pretenses. You could end up owing Marcus legal fees on top of getting zero alimony. Vanessa had sat in that lawyer's office, staring at the numbers, and realized she'd played herself. She'd spent a year planning her exit strategy, calculating her payout, waiting for the perfect moment to maximize her settlement. And in the process, she'd lost everything. Not just the money. The marriage she'd taken for granted. The stability she'd gotten used to. The future she'd stopped investing in because she was too busy planning her escape. Signing that settlement agreement, accepting Marcus's terms, no alimony, just her half of the house equity and her own assets. That was Vanessa's first real consequence. The first time she had to face what her choices had cost her. But it wasn't the last. Because what was about to come out about Tasha, about the real reason Vanessa had changed, about the history that had poisoned her thinking. All of that was still waiting. And when Marcus found out the full truth, when he learned what had really turned his wife into someone he didn't recognize, it was going to change everything he thought he knew about their story. The twist didn't come from Vanessa. It didn't come from Marcus's lawyer or from some dramatic courtroom revelation. It came from Tasha. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, after Marcus had signed the final papers and officially become a single man again, his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He'd been getting random calls from spam numbers, from debt collectors looking for the previous owner of his phone number, from people trying to sell him extended car warranties. But something made him pick up. "Hello? Marcus. It's Tasha. Tasha Williams. Can we talk?" Marcus felt his entire body tense. Tasha. Vanessa's best friend. The one she'd called immediately after he'd told her he got fired. The one who'd apparently been in on the whole plan from the beginning. His first instinct was to hang up, to block the number, and pretend this call never happened. But something in Tasha's voice stopped him. She sounded small, shaky. Nothing like the loud, confident woman he'd seen at barbecues and birthday parties, always laughing too hard at her own jokes, always the center of attention. "Why would I want to talk to you?" Marcus asked, his voice flat. "Because I owe you an apology," Tasha said. "And because there are things you need to know. Things about why Vanessa changed. Please. Just give me 30 minutes. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Fine. Coffee shop on Trade Street. Tomorrow at 2. Don't be late." When Marcus walked into the coffee shop the next afternoon, he almost didn't recognize the woman sitting at the corner table. Tasha looked wrecked. Not just tired. Wrecked. Her normally styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup. Eyes puffy and red like she'd been crying for days. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. This wasn't the Tasha he remembered from Vanessa's Instagram stories. Always posing with mimosas at brunch spots. Always dressed in designer workout clothes. Always projecting this image of having it all together. This Tasha looked like she'd been through a war and lost. Marcus sat down across from her, without ordering anything. Folded his arms. Waited. "I owe you an apology," Tasha blurted out before Marcus could say anything. "For my part in all of this. For what happened between you and Vanessa. I need to explain something to you, because you deserve to know the truth." Marcus just stared at her. "I'm listening." Tasha took a shaky breath and stared down at her coffee. "When I told Vanessa about my divorce 3 years ago, I bragged. I made it sound like some kind of victory. Like I'd won." She looked up, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "I was married to Trevor for 7 years. 7 years of him working 80-hour weeks at his law firm, of him missing anniversaries and birthdays, of him treating me like I was just another item on his to-do list. When I finally left him, when we finalized the divorce, I walked away with $120,000 between the house equity, his retirement accounts, alimony, all of it. And I told Vanessa. I told her that at least I got something back for my time, that at least those 7 years weren't wasted because I got compensated." Marcus felt his jaw clench, but he didn't interrupt. Tasha continued, her voice getting quieter. "I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't realize I was planting something ugly in her head. But every time Vanessa would complain to me about normal marriage stuff, about you leaving dishes in the sink or falling asleep during movies or not being romantic enough, I would say things like, 'Well, at least he makes good money.' Or, 'You've already put in 4 years, might as well see it through to 5 and make it worth it.' I taught her to see your marriage as an investment, as a transaction. I taught her to calculate whether staying was worth it based on what she'd get when she left." Tasha's voice cracked. "I turned her into someone who saw you as a portfolio instead of a partner. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until it was too late." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "She still made the choice, Tasha. Nobody forced Vanessa to hire a divorce attorney. Nobody forced her to calculate down to the dollar what she thought she'd get. Nobody forced her to stay in a marriage she checked out of just to maximize her payout. Those were her decisions. I know, Tasha whispered. I know she's responsible for what she did. But I helped build the mindset. I gave her the blueprint, and now I'm paying for it too. Marcus frowned. What do you mean you're paying for it? Tasha let out a laugh that had no humor in it, just bitterness and fear. My ex-husband found out. Trevor found out about what happened between you and Vanessa. About the recording, the 5-year plan, all of it. And he started asking questions about our divorce, about whether I'd done the same thing. She looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. Turns out when you text your friend detailed strategies about how to maximize a divorce settlement, about how to position yourself to get the biggest payout, about how to play the long game, those messages don't just disappear when the marriage ends. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. What are you saying? Trevor's a lawyer, Marcus, a good one. When he heard about your situation with Vanessa, he put 2 and 2 together. He started looking into our divorce, and last month, he filed a motion to reopen our divorce settlement. He's claiming I misrepresented my intentions during our marriage, that I told the court I wanted to reconcile when I was actually meeting with a divorce attorney and strategizing about how to get the most money, that I negotiated in bad faith. Tasha wiped her face with the back of her hand. They subpoenaed my phone records from back then. My text messages with Vanessa, with other friends, everything. And they found it all. Marcus. Texts where I literally said I was staying just long enough to get what I was owed. Where I calculated how much longer I needed to wait to maximize alimony. Where I told Vanessa that marriage is just a long-term investment and you have to know when to cash out. She was crying openly now. Everything I encouraged Vanessa to do, every piece of advice I gave her about treating marriage like a business transaction, I did it first. And now Trevor's attorneys are arguing that I committed fraud. That I stayed in the marriage under false pretenses, and that the settlement should be voided or significantly reduced. Marcus sat back in his chair, processing this. How much are they trying to claw back? A lot, Tasha said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe 60. 70,000. Money I've already spent, Marcus. I bought my apartment. I bought a new car. I took that trip to Europe last year to find myself and heal. I thought I was set. I thought I'd gotten away clean. And now, I might have to pay most of it back. I could end up in serious debt. I could lose my apartment. Everything. She looked at him with desperate eyes. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me. I know I don't deserve that. But I needed you to understand. I needed you to know that I didn't set out to destroy your marriage. I was just a bitter, angry woman who projected my own failed relationship onto my best friend. And now we're both paying the price. Marcus sat there in silence for a long moment. Part of him, the part that was still angry about everything that had happened, felt a grim satisfaction. This was karma. This was what happened when you treated people like transactions. When you saw relationships as opportunities for financial gain rather than genuine human connections. Tasha had poisoned Vanessa's mind with her bitterness, and now she was facing the consequences of her own actions. But another part of Marcus, the part that was trying to heal, trying to move forward rather than stay stuck in anger, felt something different. Not quite sympathy, but recognition. Recognition that hurt people, that Tasha's bitterness had come from somewhere real. That her marriage to Trevor had genuinely been painful, and she dealt with that pain in the worst possible way. I'm sorry, Marcus said quietly. Not for what you did, but for what you're going through. Tasha stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. You're sorry? Marcus, I helped destroy your marriage. I poisoned Vanessa's mind. I turned her into someone who saw you as nothing more than a paycheck. And you're sorry? My marriage ended the moment Vanessa decided money mattered more than respect, Marcus replied. You influenced her. Yeah. You gave her bad advice. You modeled a toxic way of thinking about relationships. But Vanessa is a grown woman. She made her own choices. She chose to listen to you. She chose to hire that attorney. She chose to stay with me while planning her exit. Those were her decisions, not yours. He leaned forward slightly. And now you're facing the consequences of your own choices. What you did to Trevor, what you did in your own marriage, that's on you. And if his attorneys can prove you acted in bad faith, then yeah, you should probably pay some of that money back. That's how consequences work. They sat in silence for a minute. The coffee shop hummed around them with the sound of the espresso machine, quiet conversations, someone typing on a laptop in the corner. Finally, Tasha asked, her voice small, "What are you going to do? If Trevor's attorneys contact you, if they ask you questions about me and Vanessa, what are you going to say?" Marcus thought about it. He thought about revenge, about how satisfying it would be to throw Tasha completely under the bus, to paint her as the mastermind behind Vanessa's transformation, to make sure she lost everything just like he'd lost his marriage. But he also thought about justice versus vengeance, about truth versus spite, about how tired he was of carrying anger around. "I'll tell the truth," Marcus finally said. "If they ask me, I'll tell them that you were messy, that you were bitter about your own divorce, that you gave Vanessa terrible advice and encouraged her to see our marriage as a financial transaction. I'll tell them that your influence was real and that it mattered." He paused. "But I'll also tell them that Vanessa is a grown woman who made her own choices, that you didn't force her to do anything, that she took your advice and ran with it because something in her wanted to, that you were a bad influence, but you weren't a puppet master. She had free will. She chose her path." Tasha's eyes filled with tears again. "Why would you do that? Why would you tell them anything that might help me?" "Because I'm not interested in destroying you," Marcus said. "I'm interested in the truth. And the truth is complicated. You did wrong. Vanessa did wrong. But you didn't hold a gun to her head. She made her choices knowing what she was doing." He stood up to leave. "And because carrying around anger and plotting revenge is exhausting, I've spent enough energy on this situation. I'm done. I'm moving forward. What happens to you, what happens to Vanessa, that's not my problem anymore. You'll both face whatever consequences come your way, and I'll keep building my life." Marcus left the coffee shop feeling heavy. Not angry, not satisfied, just heavy. Heavy with the knowledge that consequences don't travel alone. They ripple outward. They splash onto everyone nearby. Tasha's bitterness had infected Vanessa. Vanessa's choices had destroyed their marriage. And now both women were facing the fallout. But Marcus also left with something else, a piece of information he hadn't had before, a missing piece of the puzzle that helped him understand how Vanessa had changed. She hadn't woken up one day and decided to see him as a paycheck. It had been gradual. Influenced by someone she trusted, someone who'd modeled a toxic way of thinking about marriage and money. It didn't excuse what Vanessa had done. It didn't make the betrayal hurt less. But it did provide context. And sometimes context helps with healing. That evening, Marcus did something he hadn't planned to do. He unblocked Vanessa's number and sent her a text message. "I talked to Tasha today. I understand more now about why you changed. It doesn't excuse what you did, but I understand it better. I hope you're finding your way forward." He didn't expect a response. Didn't really want one, but 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Thank you for that. I know I don't deserve your understanding. I'm in therapy now, trying to figure out how I became someone I don't recognize. I'm sorry, Marcus, for all of it." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, "I forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying anger around. Take care of yourself, Vanessa." And this time, he meant it. The forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for him. It was choosing to let go of the weight he'd been carrying. Choosing to stop letting what she'd done define his future. Choosing peace over revenge. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Because what Marcus didn't know, what he was about to discover in the next few weeks, was that his test, his recording, his decision to file first, all of it had set off a chain reaction that would affect more than just him and Vanessa. And the final revelations, the final consequences, were still coming. A week after his conversation with Tasha, after processing everything she'd told him, after spending several sleepless nights thinking about the whole situation, Marcus sent Vanessa a text message, not the one he'd sent before about forgiveness. This one was different. "We need to talk. It's about Tasha. Can we meet?" Vanessa's response came 30 minutes later. "Okay. When and where?" They agreed to meet at a different coffee shop, not the one where Marcus had met with Tasha. Neutral ground. A place that didn't carry memories of their marriage. A Starbucks in South End, busy enough that they wouldn't feel like everyone was watching them, but quiet enough that they could actually talk. When Marcus walked in on that Saturday afternoon, he saw Vanessa sitting at a corner table near the window. She looked different. Still pretty. Still had that natural beauty that had first caught his attention at Darnell's cookout all those years ago, but softer somehow. Less polished, less armored. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup that he could see, wearing jeans and a plain sweatshirt. Not the carefully curated wellness instructor look she used to maintain. She looked like a regular person. Like someone who'd stopped performing. Marcus ordered a black coffee and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vanessa said, skipping any small talk, "Just getting right to it. I started therapy 3 weeks ago. Twice-a-week sessions with a black woman therapist in Dilworth. I'm trying to figure out how I became the woman who could do what I did to you. To us." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's good, Vanessa. I'm glad you're getting help." "Are you?" she asked, and there was no edge to it. "Just genuine curiosity. Or are you just saying that?" "I mean it," Marcus replied. "I don't hate you, Vanessa. I'm angry about what you did. I'm hurt by it. But I don't hate you, and I do hope you figure things out." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "Thank you for that." Marcus took a breath and got to the point. "I talked to Tasha last week. She reached out to me, told me about what's happening with her ex-husband, about the divorce settlement being reopened." Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "She didn't tell me that. I haven't talked to her in weeks." "What's happening?" Marcus explained everything. Trevor's motion to reopen the divorce settlement, the subpoenaed text messages, the allegations of fraud and misrepresentation, the possibility that Tasha might have to pay back $60,000 or $70,000. Money she'd already spent. As Marcus talked, he watched Vanessa's face cycle through emotions. Shock, concern, and then something else. Understanding, like pieces were clicking into place. "Oh my God," Vanessa said quietly when Marcus finished. "She didn't just give me bad advice. She was teaching me what she'd done. She was passing down her strategy." "Exactly," Marcus said. "And now Trevor's attorneys are trying to paint her as some master manipulator who controlled you. Who convinced you to destroy our marriage as part of some scheme. That's the narrative they're building." Vanessa shook her head slowly. "That's not what happened. Tasha influenced me, yes. She gave me terrible advice. She modeled a toxic way of thinking about marriage, but she didn't control me. I made my own choices." "I know that," Marcus said. "You know that, but Trevor's legal team doesn't care about nuance. They care about winning their case. And if they can make Tasha look like a puppet master, it strengthens their argument that she acted in bad faith in her own marriage." Vanessa stared at him for a long moment. "What are you asking me to do, Marcus?" "Tell the truth," he said simply. "Give a statement. To Trevor's attorneys, to the court, whoever needs to hear it. Tell them that Tasha was bitter about her own divorce, that she vented to you about it, that she shared her story and her perspective. But ultimately, you decided on your own to treat our marriage like a business transaction. That she didn't force you to hire that attorney. That she didn't force you to calculate what you'd get in a divorce. That those were your choices." He leaned forward slightly. "Look, I'm not here to defend Tasha. What she did was wrong. The advice she gave you was toxic, but she doesn't deserve to be financially destroyed and painted as some criminal mastermind. She was just a bitter woman who gave bad advice. And you were a grown woman who chose to take that advice and run with it." Vanessa looked down at her coffee cup, tears spilling over now. "Why do you care, Marcus? After everything I did to you, why would you care what happens to Tasha? Why would you even involve yourself in this?" Marcus sighed, and when he spoke, his voice was tired but genuine. "Because carrying all this anger around is exhausting. Because I've spent months being furious and hurt and betrayed, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of replaying what happened. I'm tired of imagining different versions of revenge. I'm just tired." He looked at Vanessa directly. "And because revenge isn't the same thing as justice. You already lost the comfortable life you thought you were going to have on my income. You already lost the $200,000 you thought you'd walk away with. You're living in a one-bedroom apartment, struggling to make ends meet on your gym instructor salary, facing the reality of what your choices cost you. That's enough consequence. I already lost the marriage I thought I was in. I already lost the future I was building. We've both paid a price," Marcus continued. "So, how much more blood do we need? Does Tasha need to lose everything? Does she need to end up in crushing debt? Will that make what happened to me and you any better? Will it undo anything?" Vanessa wiped her face with a napkin. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "I'll write the statement. I'll tell the truth. That Tasha influenced me, but I made my own decisions. That she didn't control me." "Thank you," Marcus said. They sat in silence for a minute, and then Vanessa started talking. Really talking. She told Marcus about therapy, about what she was learning in those sessions, about how, growing up in a household where money was always a crisis, had wired her brain to see financial security as more important than anything else. How her parents had fought constantly about money, screaming matches that would last hours, her mother crying over bills spread across the kitchen table, her father defensive and angry. How the lights got cut off more than once when she was a kid. How she'd worn the same worn-out shoes to school for an entire year because there wasn't money for new ones. How her parents would weaponize money against each other, keeping score of who owed what, who paid for what, turning their marriage into a ledger. "My therapist said I developed what's called financial trauma," Vanessa explained, her voice shaky. "That I started seeing money as oxygen, as survival, as the only thing that really mattered, because without it, everything fell apart. And when Tasha told me about her divorce settlement, about walking away with $120,000, something in my brain just clicked." She looked up at Marcus with tears streaming down her face. "It wasn't about you not being enough, Marcus. It was never about you. It was about this voice in my head that said the only way to be safe is to have money. The only way to avoid ending up like my mother, crying over bills and dependent on a man who might leave any day, was to make sure I got my share. And Tasha's story made it seem like that was smart, like that was the play. Get your years in, position yourself strategically, and walk away with enough money to never be vulnerable again. It felt like wisdom, like she was teaching me how to survive." Marcus listened, his expression unreadable. "None of that excuses what you did," Vanessa said quickly. "I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just trying to explain how I got there. How I turned into someone who could look at you, look at our marriage, and see dollar signs instead of a partnership. My therapist says I have a lot of work to do, that I need to separate my childhood trauma from my adult relationships. That I need to learn that security comes from within, not from a bank account." Marcus nodded slowly. "I appreciate you telling me that. It doesn't change what happened, but it helps me understand it better." Vanessa wiped her face again and took a shaky breath. "I know my note after the divorce didn't fix anything. I know words can't undo what I did. But I need you to know that I meant every word of it. You were a good man to me, Marcus. A really good man. You showed up every day. You were faithful. You were stable. You were everything a lot of women say they want. And I became someone I don't even recognize. Someone who took all of that for granted and turned it into a calculation." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry." Marcus. Not in a, please take me back way. I know that's not on the table, and I don't expect it to be. But in a, I did you wrong, and I know it way. In a, you deserved so much better than what I gave you way. I'm sorry for what I did. For who I became. For throwing away something real, because I was chasing something that made me feel safe. Marcus. Let those words sit in the air between them for a moment. The coffee shop hummed around them with the sound of conversation, the espresso machine hissing, someone's phone ringing. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I know you're sorry. And I also know I deserved better than the way you treated me. I deserved honesty. I deserved a partner who would talk to me when things got hard instead of secretly planning an exit strategy. I deserved someone who saw me as a person, not a paycheck. He paused, then continued. But I forgive you, Vanessa. She looked up sharply, her eyes wide with shock. You what? I forgive you, Marcus repeated. Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. Not because I think we should get back together. We shouldn't. Not because you've somehow earned forgiveness or done enough penance. You haven't. He leaned forward. I forgive you because I don't want to carry you into every new thing I build. I don't want to walk into my next relationship, whenever that happens, with all this baggage and bitterness and mistrust. It's me deciding that you don't get to take up any more space in my head or my heart. Vanessa broke then. Really broke. Her shoulders shook with sobs, her face in her hands, crying in a way that was raw and ugly and real. I don't deserve that, she sobbed. I don't deserve your forgiveness after what I did to you. Probably not, Marcus said gently. But I'm giving it anyway. Because holding on to anger was killing me slowly. Because revenge fantasies were taking up mental energy I need for building my actual life. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming a better version of myself while you deal with the consequences of your own choices. They sat there for a while longer, not saying much, just existing in that space between their old life and whatever came next. Eventually, they both stood to leave. Vanessa gave Marcus a brief, awkward hug. Thank you, she whispered, for the forgiveness, for asking me to help Tasha, for not destroying me even though you could have. Take care of yourself, Vanessa, Marcus said. Really take care of yourself. Do the therapy work. Figure out your relationship with money. Build a life that's actually yours. Not one that's dependent on someone else's bank account. I will, she promised. And Marcus, I really do hope you find someone who deserves you. Someone who sees you for who you are and doesn't take it for granted. Marcus nodded and walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than he had in months. True to her word, Vanessa wrote a detailed statement for Trevor's attorneys. Marcus helped by providing his own statement through Patricia, who coordinated with Trevor's legal team. Both statements told the same truth, that Tasha had been bitter about her own divorce and had influenced Vanessa's thinking, that she'd given terrible advice and modeled a toxic approach to marriage, but that she hadn't controlled Vanessa, that Vanessa had been a grown woman making her own choices, that Tasha's influence was real but not coercive. The statements helped Tasha's case, but they didn't save her completely. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the text messages where Tasha had explicitly discussed her strategy for maximizing her divorce settlement. In the end, the judge ruled that while Tasha hadn't committed outright fraud, she had misrepresented her intentions during the marriage and had negotiated in bad faith. The original settlement was reduced by $35,000, money that Tasha would have to repay to Trevor over the course of 5 years. It wasn't a complete disaster. She wouldn't lose her apartment. She wouldn't be financially ruined. But she would spend the next 5 years paying back a significant chunk of what she'd taken, feeling the weight of her choices in a very real, very tangible way, just like Vanessa, just like Marcus. Consequences all around. And life moved on. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Marcus got called into his boss's office at work. He'd been pouring himself into his job, working late nights, volunteering for extra projects, producing consistently excellent work. His boss, a white man in his 50s named Tom, gestured for Marcus to sit down. "Marcus, I'm going to be direct with you. You've been doing director-level work for the past 6 months, maybe longer. The campaign you led for the new medical complex in Uptown? That was exceptional. The budget management, the contractor coordination, the way you handled that permit issue with the city? That was senior leadership quality work." Tom leaned forward. "It's time the title and the paycheck match what you're actually doing. I'm promoting you to Director of Project Management. 15% salary increase. Effective immediately. You've earned it." Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride. Accomplishment. Validation. "Thank you," he said, shaking Tom's hand. "I appreciate the opportunity." The promotion meant his salary jumped from $90,000 to just over $103,000. Not that Vanessa could touch a dime of it. Not that she'd ever know about it unless she somehow found out through mutual friends. But Marcus knew, and knowing that he'd rebuilt, that he'd advanced, that he'd kept moving forward even after everything fell apart, that meant something. A few months later, Marcus went to his boy Darnell's wedding. The same friend who'd introduced him to Vanessa all those years ago at that backyard cookout. Life had come full circle in a strange way. The wedding was beautiful, held at a venue in uptown Charlotte, a big celebration with probably 200 people. Marcus had brought his cousin Jerome as his +1, not ready to date yet, still healing. Still figuring out who he was as a single man. During the reception, Marcus was standing by the punch bowl, watching people dance, when Darnell walked over with a huge grin on his face. "Yo, Marcus, you see that woman over there?" Darnell pointed toward the bridal party table. "That's my wife's cousin, Lauren. She's a physical therapist, just moved here from Raleigh last month. She's smart, she's funny, she's got her own thing going on. You want me to introduce you?" Marcus looked over. The woman Darnell was pointing to had warm brown eyes, natural hair in twists, and a genuine smile as she laughed at something the bride said. She was wearing a simple burgundy dress, nothing flashy or attention-seeking, just elegant and comfortable in her own skin. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something. Not desperation. Not the need to fill a void. Just simple, genuine interest. "Yeah," Marcus said, surprised by how easy the word came out. "I think I do." Darnell made the introduction. Marcus and Lauren talked for 20 minutes by that punch bowl, and then moved to a quieter corner of the venue where they could actually hear each other. They talked about her work in physical therapy, about his work in construction management, about why she'd moved to Charlotte, about what he liked about the city. Normal conversation. Easy conversation. No games. No calculation. Just two people getting to know each other. When Marcus drove home that night, he had Lauren's number in his phone and plans to meet for coffee the following week. He felt something he hadn't felt since before everything fell apart with Vanessa. Hope. Not hope that Lauren would be the one, or that this would definitely turn into something serious. Just simple hope that good things could still happen. That life could still surprise him in positive ways. That maybe, after everything fell apart, he could build something new, something better, something real. As for Vanessa, her life continued on a different trajectory. She kept teaching her fitness classes, though she'd had to pick up more hours to make ends meet. She'd also started teaching corporate wellness sessions, going to office buildings during lunch breaks to lead meditation and stretching sessions for stressed-out employees. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. She went to therapy every Wednesday and Friday, 50-minute sessions where she cried and processed, and slowly started to understand the patterns that had led her to sabotage her own marriage. She'd stopped following Tasha on social media, had stopped reaching out. They'd had one conversation after Vanessa wrote the statement for Trevor's attorneys, and it had been painful. Both women acknowledging their role in what had happened. Both women facing consequences. Both women trying to figure out how to move forward. Vanessa's life was smaller than the life she'd imagined when she was planning her divorce strategy. Smaller than the life she'd thought she'd have with $200,000 and a fresh start. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture from IKEA and Facebook Marketplace. She drove the same car she'd had when she was married to Marcus. A car that was now 7 years old and starting to have issues. She didn't go out to brunch every weekend with friends. Didn't take trips. Didn't buy the expensive workout clothes she used to. Her life was constrained by her actual income, which was about $2,500 a month after taxes. Enough to survive, not enough to thrive. But one evening, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Vanessa pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex after a long day of teaching classes. She was carrying grocery bags from Aldi, the discount store she'd started shopping at to save money. She was tired. Her feet hurt. She hadn't posted on Instagram in 2 weeks because she didn't have anything worth posting. Her life wasn't curated or aesthetic or inspirational. It was just life. And as she walked up the stairs to her second-floor apartment, as she unlocked her door and set the grocery bags on her small kitchen counter, Vanessa realized something. She was tired, yes, but she wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't performing, wasn't maintaining an image, wasn't calculating what she could get from anyone. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time since she was a child, Vanessa was just herself, flawed, struggling, making less money than she wanted, living a smaller life than she'd planned. But it was hers. Built on her own income, her own work, her own choices, not dependent on anyone else's bank account, not positioned strategically for some future payout, just hers. And in a strange way, that felt like freedom. Sometimes starting from scratch, starting with nothing, rebuilding from the ground up. That's the tuition you pay for lessons you refuse to learn when life tried to teach you gently. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what actually matters. Sometimes the consequences of your choices become the catalyst for becoming someone better. Marcus Bennett's story isn't about gotcha moments or perfectly executed revenge. It's not about a hero and a villain. It's about what happens when fear, bad advice, and unhealed trauma collide with two people who never learned how to be truly honest, not with each other and not with themselves. Marcus learned that testing someone's love is a dangerous game. That sometimes when you go looking for the truth, you find something that breaks your heart into pieces you didn't know existed. But he also learned that finding out the truth, as painful as it was, saved his future. Because if he'd never tested Vanessa, if he'd never made that recording, if he'd just kept going along pretending everything was fine, she would have waited exactly 7 more months. She would have hit that 5-year mark. And then one random Tuesday or Thursday, Marcus would have come home to divorce papers he never saw coming. He would have been blindsided completely, with no documentation, no proof, no leverage. He would have been the one scrambling to understand what happened, while Vanessa executed a plan she'd been building for over a year. The test broke his heart, yes, but it also gave him clarity. It gave him proof. It gave him control over his own story. And sometimes that's what love requires. Not blind trust, not faith that ignores red flags, but honest assessment of whether the person you're with is actually with you. Vanessa learned that treating relationships like transactions, seeing marriage as a business arrangement, calculating your exit strategy while your partner is still planning a future, that approach might secure a check. It might maximize your settlement. It might make you feel smart and strategic, but it'll bankrupt you in the places that matter most. It'll bankrupt you emotionally. It'll bankrupt you spiritually. It'll leave you sitting in a one-bedroom apartment you can barely afford, eating discount groceries, realizing that all that money you thought you'd walk away with wasn't worth losing yourself over. Vanessa learned that security doesn't come from a bank account, that healing your relationship with money requires actually healing your trauma, not projecting it onto every relationship you enter, that the comfortable life she thought she'd have on Marcus's income wasn't worth the person she had to become to get it. She learned these lessons the hard way. Building a life that's actually hers, not one that's dependent on manipulating someone else's resources. Tasha learned that the advice you give from your own bitterness and pain doesn't just affect the person you're giving it to. It circles back. It ripples outward, and eventually crashes back onto your own shore. She learned that teaching someone else to see marriage as a transaction, to calculate what they're owed, to time their exit for maximum financial gain, that's not friendship, that's poisoning someone you claim to care about. And the universe has a way of making you face the consequences of the poison you spread. Tasha will spend the next 5 years paying back $35,000 to her ex-husband, feeling the weight of her choices every single month when that payment comes out of her account. She won't be financially destroyed. But she'll remember, she'll feel it. And maybe that's the point. Maybe consequences aren't meant to destroy us. Maybe they're meant to teach us, to force us to sit with what we've done and decide who we want to be going forward. All three of them, Marcus, Vanessa, and Tasha, learn that consequences aren't always revenge. They're not always punishment handed down by angry people looking to hurt you back. Sometimes consequences are just reality catching up. They're just the natural result of choices you made, coming home to roost. They're the bill for the life you tried to shortcut, the relationship you took for granted, the advice you gave without thinking about its real impact. So now I want to ask you something. Really think about this. If you'd overheard your spouse on the phone calculating the payout of your marriage, would you have tested them like he did? Would you have had the guts to set up that recording, to fake losing your job, to watch their reaction in real time? Or would you have confronted them directly? Or maybe just walked away without explanation? What would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me if you think Marcus was justified, or if you think he was wrong for manipulating the situation. If you were Vanessa, if you realized somewhere along the way that your thinking about marriage had become toxic, that you were seeing your husband as a paycheck instead of a person, would you have had the courage to walk away? To say, "This isn't working, I'm not healthy, I need to leave before I do more damage"? Or would you have done what she did, doubled down, kept going with the plan, waited for the 5-year mark because you'd already invested so much time? Be honest with yourself. What would you have done in her position? And if you were Tasha, if you realized that your advice had helped destroy your best friend's marriage, that your bitterness had infected someone else's relationship, would you have had the courage to reach out, to apologize, to tell the truth even when it meant exposing your own failures? Or would you have stayed silent, let the consequences fall where they may, protected yourself first? These aren't easy questions. There are no perfect answers. But they're worth thinking about, because this story, Marcus and Vanessa's story, it's not unique. It happens every day in different forms. People treating relationships like transactions. People staying in marriages they've already left emotionally, because the timing isn't right yet. People giving advice from their own trauma without realizing they're spreading poison. People testing their partners instead of talking to them. People choosing strategy over honesty. And all of these choices, they have consequences. Real ones. The kind you can't undo with an apology or a settlement check. If this story made you feel anything, anger at Vanessa's calculation, pity for Marcus's heartbreak, frustration with Tasha's interference, or hope that people can actually learn and grow from their mistakes, then you understand something important. You understand that relationships are complicated, that people are complicated, that sometimes there's no clear villain and no perfect hero, just flawed human beings making choices and facing the consequences. Remember this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's not plotting how to hurt someone back. It's not spending your energy figuring out how to make them suffer the way they made you suffer. The best revenge is becoming a better version of yourself. It's healing your trauma instead of passing it on. It's building a real life instead of a curated image. It's choosing honesty over strategy. It's forgiving not because the other person earned it, but because carrying anger is exhausting and you deserve peace. The best revenge is Marcus getting that promotion 6 months after his divorce, building a life that's genuinely his, meeting someone new when he's actually ready, not because he needs to fill a void, but because he's open to connection again. The best revenge is Vanessa doing the hard work in therapy, facing her financial trauma, learning to build security from within instead of extracting it from someone else, learning to be alone and okay with it, learning that a smaller, honest life beats a bigger, fake one every time. The best revenge is all of them sitting with the bills for their own decisions. Marcus rebuilding after betrayal. Vanessa rebuilding after self-sabotage. Tasha repaying money she thought she'd gotten away with. All of them learning. All of them growing. All of them becoming better than they were. That's the real story here. Not the test or the recording or the divorce, but what happened after. How people choose to move forward when everything falls apart. Whether they learn from their consequences or repeat their patterns. Whether they become bitter or better. Marcus chose better. And if you take anything from this story, let it be that. When life fact-checks you, when your choices come home to roost, when you're sitting in the wreckage of something you helped destroy, you have a choice. You can become bitter, or you can become better. Choose better. Every time. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about real people facing real consequences and real choices. Stories that will make you think long after the video ends. Stories that might make you look at your own relationships differently. Stories that remind you that we're all just trying to figure this out, and sometimes we get it wrong, and that's okay as long as we're willing to learn. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's going through something similar. Someone who's trying to decide whether to stay or go. Someone who's rebuilding after betrayal. Someone who's facing consequences. Someone who just needs to know they're not alone in this messy, complicated journey we call relationships. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying till the end. And remember, the truth might hurt, but it's the lies that do the real damage. Choose truth. Choose growth. Choose better.